Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing some 5-minute, and I decided to open with e4 in this one. And let's go into the main line, open Sicilian. My opponent's playing a Kan, so I'll play bishop d3. Plays queen c7, I'll just castle. And we could get a hedgehog type position. Let's do that. He goes knight c6. I think I'll probably just take. And usually they try to go e5 here after. So I'm expecting that to happen. Yeah, and now I'll go h3. So he has some control over the d4 square, and I can't say that I have the d5 square fully in my grasp because he has a pawn here. But one plan I can try to execute is knight a4 and bishop e3. And in fact, I think I'm going to play bishop e3 right away, just trying to shake his defense on the dark squares. It seems a little strange to trade my dark square bishop because my light square bishop is my worst bishop. But I think this is justified, and I got to get rid of that piece he had on c5. It was too strong. So now I think I'm going to play either knight a4 or rook fd1. I think I like knight a4. So I'm going to do that. Just try to probe him, maybe get the knight into b6 or c5. I think rook a d8 would be a good move for him here, so that if I do play knight c5, he could play the bishop back to c8. That would not be bad at all. I kind of think maybe I should go for f4. I'm going to play rook a d1 in this position, so that if he plays rook d4, maybe I can retain the option of f4. He's playing logical and strong moves. Let's go b3. He'll probably double up his rooks now. Yeah, this is a slightly annoying scenario for me. I'd hate to have to bring my knight back to c3 in order to go to e2 and make him move this rook. It's looking like I might have to do that. Let's just do it. I really had more aspirations for that knight on c5 or b6, but that plan looks like it wasn't working. Like knight c5, he could just drop his bishop back to c8. It's not a problem for him. At least this way I'm going to play knight e2, and I know his rook will have to move, unless he wants to sack an exchange, which probably is not a good idea. I'd say black is at least equal here. Probably he's slightly for choice, so I think I'm a little bit worse, mainly due to the d4 square and me having the worst bishop. But I think it's a manageable disadvantage from my end. I think if I play accurately over the next 5 moves or so, I should be able to fully equalize. And we'll see how he treats this plan with knight e2. I think he'll probably back off. I mean, he'd really like to be able to get his knight to d4 if he could. If his knight was in striking range of that square, that would be perfect for him. Okay, so he's going to attack my bishop. Maybe he wants to get the queen into a3. This is his plan. So I can play bishop c2, but he really might get the queen in pretty far. Still, though, I sort of feel like I should play that move. Yeah, let's do that. And if queen a3, I think I got to go f4. Because the problem will be that if he goes queen a3, then my knight is not able to play knight e2, or not able to go to e2 because he could trade on d1 and my a2 pawn would be hanging. So this maneuver of the queen to a3 is not a bad idea to interfere with my attempt to play knight e2. He must not be entirely sure because he's taking a little time. So now I can play knight e2, but he can go rook d2, I guess is one idea. But I think I see a trap in that case. Okay, so let's do this. Just checking to make sure I'm not missing any tactics. So if he plays rook d2 now, trying to trade on the square, I can take. He takes with the queen, and then I can play rook d1, which unfortunately he has queen a5. But still, I think I should do this. because it nearly wins material for me, because the point is if queen takes e3, I have rook takes d8 check in between move. Fortunately, he has that move, but still, I think the simplifications I get because of this are making it worth it, basically. I'd like to bring my queen in, but I'm worried about queen d2, so I have to mine that move. I think I'll just play f4 now and just knock out that pawn. And I'm taking on an isolated pawn here by doing this, but I might be able to push e5. Now I have pressure on his bishop, so I'm trying to make my minor pieces better with this operation. Yep, knight d7. I'm going to move my king. Well, where do I want to put my king, though, is the problem. I could take. Let's just take. Let's play queen d4. Let's pin him. I'm letting him go into an endgame if he wants. With queen b6. But I don't think I'm any worse in that endgame. And it's hard to say, actually. Let's just bring our king up. I don't want a bad bishop out of this. I'd really like to avoid that if I could. Right now, my bishop is restricted by my own pawns. He plays e5, okay. So now I feel like I should play c5 and gain some space and try to establish more pawns on dark squares. I want these pawns to complement my bishop, which means putting them on the opposite color of my bishop. So when you have one minor piece remaining, like a bishop, it's usually bishops that run into this problem. You don't want to spend too much time. Well, this is a mistake, isn't it? Because I can do this and then bishop here. How's he going to defend this pawn? But anyways, you don't want to spend too much time putting pawns on the same color as your remaining bishop, because you'll be reproducing the squares and restricting your own bishop in the process. Okay, so he's letting me take that pawn. He's going to go knight c3. Is that his idea? Okay, but still I should do this. And then go here.
Check.
Now, let's just go king here. And bishop here. I got to be a little careful now. But actually his knight is running out of squares.
Check.
His knight has to go to h1. Ooh. And now I can essentially trap it. If I'm careful. Let's go here just to make sure he can't go h4. Yeah, his knight's getting trapped. Yeah, knight's goner. h4 is nice because if he had been allowed to play h4 himself, and I'm just going to go here now. If he had been allowed to play h4 himself, he would have the g3 square available to retreat to. Yeah, and he resigned. Neat endgame in that one. So I actually played the Kan from the black side. So I maybe should have chosen a more challenging line against this. But it's weird, like playing against an opening that you have a decent amount of experience from the other side of the board. I've always felt like, and maybe you guys can either agree with this or disagree with this in the comments, but I've always felt like if you enjoy playing an opening from the black side, you sometimes have a real problem playing against it from the white side. I've just experienced this many times. This line I chose is not so good, by the way. If I'm going to go for this Meraxi setup, I should play c4 immediately and just start setting it up. Yeah, I chose this way. And, I don't know. I mean, I've played structures like this before, but it seems like black's usually doing pretty well. And that d4 square is such a chronic weakness. Maybe I should have gone knight a4 right away, but if knight a4, I was afraid he would go bishop d4, and it would be harder to shake this bishop. So I'd rather offer an exchange, bishop for bishop, immediately. Yeah, and this plan maybe was optimistic. Rook a d8 is nice, because if he uses the other rook, rook f d8, then knight c5 is more disruptive, potentially, because I'm thinking about taking his bishop and messing up his pawns, and if he wanted to play bishop c8, he'd have to disconnect his rooks. So by playing rook a d8, he ensures that if I do play knight c5, he can always drop back to c8, and that doesn't interfere with his rook coordination. So it's a good move by him. Let's just see here. I think Like roundabout here, I was saying that I thought I was a little bit worse, and I'm just curious if the engine agrees with that. Yeah. Says I'm significantly worse. More than half a pawn. Okay, and I'm glad that knight c3 is the best move, so I was kind of recognizing that I was no better here. Yeah, I think at this point he has to find a better plan than what he did in the game, because I think the way he played it allowed me to equalize. So queen a3, this was the annoying move I was alluding to, because then my knight has trouble activating itself because its role now is to guard the a2 pawn. For that reason, I was considering playing bishop b1, but it just looks worse. Also, bishop b1, I'd have to consider this line.
Check.
Which,
check.
At first sight looks very good for black, but if, I'm going to turn off the engine so you guys can't cheat, what happens if rook takes b1? What can white do here at the end? Seemingly, this is good for black. He's got a rook plus 2 minor pieces for the queen. But white to move, how can white turn this on its head? The answer is queen d3, hitting the rook and threatening the back rank checkmate. That would have been a nice trap, actually. I could easily see him falling for that. Not because like he's likely to fall for it based on his rating, but it just seems like a type of move that you would immediately play because you're like, oh, I'm going to get all these pieces for the queen, but nope, queen d3 at the end. But I played bishop c2 instead. Yeah, and I think after knight e2, my position is shaping up fine. Yeah, and he had queen a5. I actually suspect that he might not have seen that I had rook d1 in this position, but fortunately for him, he did have the queen a5 defense.
Check.
I traded, I pushed f4. Really doesn't like that move. Ah, because he can ignore it. Yeah, I didn't see queen a5. That defends e5, kind of probes the e1 square, and also attacks a2 for good measure. Yeah, that would have given him nice play. Instead, he took, and I was able to take this way. Here, and I went for this endgame, queen d4. It does sort of feel like he should keep the queen and knight together, to keep those on the board and not trade queens. Because in this endgame, he has some advantages in that my pawns are all on light squares for the moment, so I need to get some on dark squares to complement my bishop, as I was saying. But in general, queen and knight is a more effective combination than queen and bishop. Again, for reasons of reproducing squares. Like a queen and knight together, they don't reproduce any squares. Whereas a queen and bishop will always reproduce some squares. Like, they move the same way on the diagonals. So you're going to have some squares that are redundant. But with a queen and knight, you always have a lot of potential to attack most everything. So that's kind of a generalization in this position, but yeah, I think a move like queen e7 would give me more problems here. And that would also make it harder for me to establish pawns on dark squares, because when he has the ability to attack pawns that I establish on dark squares with both his queen and knight, I think it's going to take me longer to set them up that way, because I'll be fearing for attacks. Whereas when he trades queens, like, I know I only have to watch out for his knight pretty much if I'm going to put up on a dark square. I brought the king up. Yeah, that's interesting. It says I should go c5 right away to preempt him playing c5. Because after king f2, it looks like this move would have been decent for him. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I just automatically brought my king up because I didn't want to have to make a decision about which pawn to move in the center. Yeah, and here b6, I'm sure, was just impatient by him. Yeah, that's not a good move at all. So a5 was a better move, undermining this pawn. I would have played a3 in response to that. I thought maybe he would go knight f8, trying to get into this square. But I do have this bishop check, should I need it, so I can keep him at bay here. And I see the engine is giving me like a tiny, tiny advantage now. It's not totally surprising. Because if I can neutralize this knight, now that I have these pawns on dark squares, I've got more freedom for this bishop. There's no reason to think black would be better at this point. So yeah, b6 is an instructive mistake. He just missed bishop d3. Now I have to be slightly careful. I actually forgot that bishop c4 was check. I just played bishop c4 here to defend my pawn, but I forgot it was check. So maybe I should have been trickier. Yeah, king d3 probably would have been better because he can't take it. So I check then and win his knight. But no
Check.
matter. I played this, and then king d3. Yeah, and that move sealed his fate, didn't it? He had to play knight a4 and get out via b6. But he's still struggling. I think this position is probably winning for white because I'm going to distract, at the minimum, one of his pieces, either his knight or his king, in trying to stop my a-pawn. And then I'll look to infiltrate with my king, like possibly even bring it over to the king side. And this bishop is a very nice piece. Restricts his knight quite a bit. So, yeah, this was a nice trap of his knight, though. This is really elegant. Forcing him to go to h1. He has no other squares to bring his knight to. And then we just systematically take away any escape routes. We've already got f2 and g3 covered. So h5 is practically his only move to try to rescue that piece. I went h4. Yeah, and here. Yeah, I mean, I could take the pawn and still win too, but why even give him a chance to get his knight out? g3 is just nice and tidy, and this is coming next move. So, all right. I like that game a lot. That was fun. So hope you guys enjoyed that one as well. And please leave me any feedback in the comments. Thanks, guys.